The unthinkable incident. The jungle was alive with strange sounds. Leaves rustled underfoot, thick vines wrapped around massive trees, and glowing insects buzzed through the humid air. Ethan Carter wiped the sweat from his forehead and adjusted the oxygen filter on his uniform. This was his first diplomatic mission to Xalvora, an alien world ruled by a proud warrior species. His job: establish peace between humans and the Xalvoran Empire. But right now, he was lost. The path he had been following had vanished. The thick fog made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. His communication device crackled, but there was no signal. His escort was supposed to be here, but they were nowhere in sight. Great, first human diplomat on this planet, and I'm already screwing it up, Ethan muttered. Suddenly, he heard something. A soft humming sound, almost like a chant. His heart pounded as he stepped closer, pushing aside thick vines. He peered through a gap in the foliage and froze. Before him, in the middle of a glowing blue pond, stood Commander Zara. She was one of the most powerful warriors in the Xalvoran military, famous, feared, and highly respected. But Ethan barely recognized her now. She was unclothed, standing knee-deep in the water, her bronze skin reflecting the soft glow of the bioluminescent plants around her. Her jet-black hair was wet, clinging to her sharp, angular face. Strange symbols were painted across her arms and chest. She had her eyes closed, deep in a meditative trance. Ethan's brain screamed at him to turn away, but before he could move, she opened her eyes. For a long second, neither of them spoke. Then, Zara's eyes widened in absolute horror. A sharp wind howled through the jungle as she lunged forward, faster than humanly possible. Ethan barely had time to react before a strong hand wrapped around his throat and slammed him against a tree. "What have you done, human?" she hissed, her voice filled with fury. Ethan gasped for air. I didn't mean to." Zara's grip tightened. "You saw me in the sacred state. This is an unforgivable crime." Ethan's mind raced. Sacred state. He didn't know what that meant, but judging by the sheer rage in her eyes, it was very bad. "I swear, I didn't mean to intrude," he choked out. "I was lost." Zara's expression twisted in anger and something else. Fear. Her hands trembled. She looked around as if making sure no one else had seen them. Ethan took a shaky breath. "Look, I'll leave. I won't tell anyone." "It is too late." Her voice was deadly quiet now. "You have seen me. There is only one way to restore my honor." Ethan swallowed hard. "And that is?" Her eyes burned into his. "We must wed." Ethan's mind blanked. "What?" "If we do not bond, the High Council will demand my execution. And you." She exhaled sharply. "You will die as well." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "Hold on. That doesn't make any sense. I just saw you, that's all. How is that a crime?" Zara stepped back, fists clenched. "The sacred cleansing is a ritual only meant for warriors before battle. No one, not even my own people, is allowed to see me in that moment of vulnerability." She inhaled deeply, as if trying to steady herself. "If the council learns of this, I will be stripped of my rank and executed for dishonor." Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. "And me?" Her eyes darkened. "You will be seen as the cause of my disgrace. The punishment for this is death." Ethan let out a nervous laugh. "So my choices are, marry you or die." Zara's jaw tightened. "Yes." A long silence followed. The jungle around them was still. Even the insects had stopped buzzing. Finally, Ethan sighed and rubbed his temples. "I was not trained for this." Zara exhaled sharply, her frustration clear. "Neither was I." Then, from deep within the jungle, a sharp sound echoed. A battle horn. Zara's face paled. "They already know." Ethan turned toward the sound. He could see glowing lights moving through the trees. Xalvoran warriors were coming. Zara grabbed his wrist. "There is no time to argue." Ethan felt his stomach twist. "You're serious about this?" She nodded, her expression unreadable. "Then let's get married, I guess." Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. "You will regret this, human." A moment later, the warriors broke through the trees, weapons drawn, and the fate of both their lives was sealed. A forced union and rising tension. The great halls of the Salvoran High Council loomed before Ethan Carter, carved from black obsidian and glowing with eerie blue veins of energy. The air inside was thick with incense, and the distant hum of ceremonial drums echoed through the chamber. Dozens of Salvoran elders sat in a semicircle, their piercing golden eyes fixed on him with quiet judgment. Ethan stood in the center of the room, wrists bound in Nexian cords, which tingled against his skin like static electricity. His heart pounded, but he kept his expression neutral. Across from him, Commander Zera knelt, fists pressed to the stone floor in a traditional gesture of submission. She was no longer the fierce warrior he had encountered in the jungle. Now she was dressed in ceremonial robes of dark crimson, the Salvoran symbol of obligation and shame. The weight of what was happening hit Ethan all at once. He, a human diplomat, was about to be forced into an alien marriage, a union that was more than just symbolic. It was a bond that would tie their lives, their fates, and even their biology together. And if he refused, death. A deep, guttural voice filled the chamber. The human has seen what no outsider should ever witness. The law is clear. There are only two paths, marriage or execution. Ethan's gaze flickered toward the speaker, High Chancellor Vorak, an ancient Salvoran whose presence alone could silence an entire army. His black, ridged horns curved backward like a crown, his face carved with deep lines of age and authority. He was the final voice on all matters of honor. Zera's voice was firm, but her shoulders were rigid. "I accept the bond." Ethan hesitated. His instincts screamed at him to fight this, to argue, to find another way. But looking into Zera's face, he saw something unexpected. Beneath her controlled exterior, there was something else. Fear, not fear for herself. Fear for him. Ethan swallowed hard and forced himself to speak. "I accept the bond." A murmur spread through the council, some sounding approving, others skeptical. Vorak raised a gnarled hand, silencing them. He gestured toward an elder priestess who stepped forward carrying a small obsidian dagger with glowing blue symbols carved into its blade. "Then let the bonding begin." The ritual of binding. Ethan barely had time to process what was happening before Zera turned toward him, holding out her hand. "Give me your palm." He hesitated, but then slowly reached out. The priestess sliced a thin line across Zera's palm first. A thick, dark violet-colored blood welled up, shimmering under the torchlight. Then, before Ethan could react, she did the same to him. A sharp burning sensation shot through his skin. Human blood mixed with Salvoran blood, dripping onto the ceremonial stone between them. The second their blood touched, the air around them seemed to pulse. A cold wave of energy rushed into Ethan's veins, spreading up his arm like liquid fire. He gasped as his vision blurred. His mind snapped open, and for the briefest moment, he felt Zera's presence inside his own mind. A rush of memories, emotions, instincts that weren't his, her battles, her training, her pain. Then, just as suddenly, the connection snapped back, leaving him gasping for breath. Zera was breathing heavily too, her eyes flickering with something unfamiliar. The priestess stepped back. "The bond is complete. From this day forward, you are one." Vorak's voice rumbled once more. "Let the human prove his worth in the coming trials. If he fails, he will die." The aftermath. Later that night, Ethan sat on the balcony of their assigned quarters, staring out at the massive alien city below. The skyline was a mix of ancient stone and futuristic technology, hovering crafts moving between tall spires of black metal and glowing lights. Behind him, Zera stood near the entrance, arms crossed. The silence between them was heavy. "You are handling this surprisingly well," she finally said. Ethan let out a short laugh. "You mean the part where I was almost executed, got forcefully married, and now have an alien consciousness tangled with mine? Yeah, I'd say I'm doing great." Zara exhaled through her nose. "It could have been worse." Ethan turned to her. "How?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over and sat down beside him, staring out at the skyline. For the first time, she looked tired. "I did not expect you to accept so easily." "Yeah, well, I like living." A small smirk touched the corner of her lips, but it disappeared quickly. "You don't understand what the bond truly means yet, do you?" Ethan frowned. "It's just a ritual, right? A legal thing." Zara's expression darkened. "No, human. It is much more than that." She leaned forward, her voice quiet but firm. "You are no longer just human. The nanites in my blood are inside you now. They will change you." Ethan stiffened. "What kind of changes?" Zara looked away. "You will find out soon enough." Before Ethan could ask anything else, a loud alarm blared across the city. A warning siren. Zara immediately stood, her posture shifting back into warrior mode. She turned to Ethan. "Stay here." He rose to his feet. "Yeah, that's not gonna happen." Before she could argue, a holographic screen flickered to life in the room. A message from the High Council flashed across it. "A member of the High Command has been attacked. This is an act of war." Zara's face went pale. Ethan felt a deep, unnatural chill crawl up his spine. Something was very, very wrong. And deep inside, he could feel it. The bond was reacting to something. Something dangerous. The bonding effect. The pain hit Ethan like a tidal wave. It started as a deep burn in his veins, spreading from his palm up his arm, then crawling into his chest. He stumbled, gripping the edge of the stone balcony railing, gasping for breath. His vision flickered. Colors too bright, sounds too sharp, his heartbeat pounding like war drums in his ears. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to breathe. What the hell is happening to me? Behind him, Commander Zara watched, arms crossed. Her face was unreadable, but Ethan could sense something in her stance. Hesitation. "The bond is taking effect." Her voice was calm, controlled, too controlled. Ethan turned to her, forcing a smirk despite the fire raging inside his body. "Oh great, I was wondering when the side effects would kick in. What's next? Do I start growing horns?" Zara tilted her head. "Not horns, but you will change." Ethan's stomach twisted at the certainty in her voice. "Change how?" Zara sighed and finally stepped closer, studying him like a scientist observing a test subject. "Your body is adjusting to the nanites in my blood. They are rewriting parts of your DNA, enhancing you in ways no human has ever experienced before." Ethan stiffened. "Enhancing? You mean, like, superhuman stuff?" Zara narrowed her eyes. "Not superhuman. Exalvoran. You are becoming one of us." Silence. The words hit Ethan harder than the pain coursing through him. "You're joking." "I do not joke." Ethan looked down at his hands. His skin felt different, warmer. His fingertips tingled. He could hear his own blood moving through his veins, his muscles twitching like they were being rebuilt. Asterisk, and you just forgot to mention this before the wedding. Zara exhaled sharply. "Would it have changed your answer?" Ethan clenched his fists. "Yeah, a little." Zara didn't respond, and for a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The night air was thick with tension, the distant hum of warships echoing through the city. Then the alarm blared again. A red glow filled the sky. Outside, the Exalvoran defense grid was activating. Massive energy shields rising over the capital. A fleet of warships appeared on the horizon, their dark, jagged silhouettes cutting through the clouds. Zara's expression turned deadly serious. The attack has begun. The assassin's betrayal. The doors to their quarters slammed open. Ethan spun around, instincts sharper than they had ever been before. Two Xalvoran warriors in black combat armor stormed in, their energy weapons raised. Their eyes burned with hostility. Zara immediately reached for her blade, but she was too slow. One of the warriors aimed directly at her chest. Ethan moved before he even thought about it. He didn't know how, didn't understand the speed, the precision, but his body reacted like it had trained for this all its life. He lunged forward, grabbing the warrior's arm mid-shot, twisting it hard. The weapon discharged, a bolt of plasma searing past Zara's shoulder, missing her by inches. Ethan's heart pounded. He shouldn't have been fast enough. The warrior snarled, trying to recover, but Ethan's reflexes had already adjusted. He struck, an instinctive movement, fist connecting with the enemy's ribs. The sound was wrong. Not the dull impact of flesh against armor. It was louder, stronger, like metal striking metal. The warrior collapsed, gasping for breath. Ethan stared at his own hand, realization hitting him like a freight train. I just took down a trained Xalvoran soldier with a single punch. Zara wasted no time, using the distraction to disarm the second warrior, flipping him over and pinning him to the floor with her knee. "Who sent you?" she hissed. The soldier growled, his throat muscles tightening. His eyes darkened. Ethan recognized the look. "Zara, move." But it was too late. The warrior bit down on something in his mouth. A small explosion erupted from inside his helmet. The force sent Zara stumbling back. Smoke filled the room. When it cleared, both soldiers were dead. Self-termination. Ethan swallowed hard, looking at Zara. "They weren't here to kill me. They were here for you." Zara wiped blood from her cheek, her expression unreadable. "Yes." The conspiracy unfolds. Moments later, the High Council's emergency transmission echoed through their quarters. "Commander Zara, Diplomat Ethan Carter, you are to report to the Grand Hall immediately." Ethan turned to Zara, chest still heaving from the fight. "You want to explain what the hell is going on? Why are your own people trying to kill you?" Zara wiped her blade clean, jaw tight. "Because someone wants me dead before I uncover the truth." Ethan's headache pounded, the nanite still burning in his blood. The truth about what? Zara met his gaze, eyes dark with something dangerous. The real reason behind this marriage. Ethan blinked. "Wait, you're saying this wasn't just about honor?" Zara turned toward the door, already moving. "No, human, it was never just about honor." As they stepped out into the dark corridors, Ethan felt something deep inside him shift. He was changing. The bond was growing stronger, and he was beginning to realize he might never be human again. The hidden conspiracy. The Grand Hall of the Xalvoran High Council was alive with tension. The massive chamber, carved from ancient blackstone, was illuminated by streams of glowing energy that pulsed through the walls like veins in a living body. At the center of the room stood a raised circular platform, and standing upon it were Commander Zara and Ethan Carter. Around them, the High Council watched in silence. 20 of the most powerful Xalvoran leaders, their expressions unreadable. Behind them, towering guards stood motionless, their weapons humming with latent energy. Ethan clenched his fists. The pain in his body had dulled, but something else had taken its place. Awareness. His senses were sharper than ever. He could hear the faintest whispers across the room, see every flicker of emotion on the faces of the council members. It was the bond. It was changing him. He turned his head slightly, glancing at Zara. She stood rigid, her expression carved from stone, but Ethan could feel her emotions now. She was angry, not at him, but at the council. "Commander Zara," came the deep, measured voice of High Chancellor Vorak. The ancient warrior sat upon his throne, fingers steepled. "You have broken sacred tradition. You have bonded with an outsider. The law dictates consequences." Zara's eyes burned with fury. "I follow the law. I chose the only path that ensured peace. Vorak's golden eyes flickered with something. Approval? Annoyance? Ethan couldn't tell. And yet, the Chancellor continued, "Your marriage has brought chaos instead of unity. There has been an assassination attempt, a betrayal from within." Ethan took a step forward. His voice was firm. "You knew this was coming, didn't you?" Murmurs spread across the chamber. A human addressing the High Council so directly. Unheard of. Vorak turned his gaze toward him. "Explain yourself, human." Ethan took a breath, every instinct telling him he was about to step into dangerous territory. But he wasn't backing down. The attack on Zara wasn't random. Those assassins weren't acting alone. Someone in this room ordered it. Silence. Then, a slow chuckle. From the far side of the chamber, a figure leaned forward. General Tsathis. Ethan had only seen him in reports, a high-ranking military leader known for his brutal tactics and loyalty to the old ways. His dark armor gleamed under the council's light, and his sharp, ridged face twisted into something that resembled amusement. "You are bold, human, but also naive. Do you think an assassination attempt proves conspiracy?" Ethan narrowed his eyes. "No, but the fact that you're smirking about it does." The room tensed. Tsathis rose slowly, his towering form casting a long shadow across the chamber. "You think you understand our ways, human. You do not." He turned his gaze to Zara. "And you, Commander, you have let an outsider infect your blood. What you have done is an abomination." Zara's fists tightened, but her voice remained calm. "Careful with your words, General." "Or what?" Tsathis sneered. "Will you challenge me, as our ancestors once did? Will your human fight in your place, as the bond allows?" Ethan blinked. "Wait. What?" Vorak interjected, his voice heavy with authority. "You speak of the right of proving." Tsathis turned back to the council. "Yes, the law is clear. If the human truly wishes to stand by her side, let him prove his worth in combat." Ethan felt his stomach drop. Oh, hell no. Vorak was silent for a long moment, considering. Then he gave a slow nod. "The challenge is valid. The right of proving shall proceed." The arena of blood. Ethan stood in the center of the right arena, heart pounding. The chamber was massive, an underground coliseum carved from volcanic rock, its floors stained from centuries of battle. The air was thick with heat and the scent of metal. Thousands of Zalvoran warriors stood in the surrounding balconies, watching with eager anticipation. The atmosphere buzzed with hunger for battle. Ethan was unarmed. Across from him stood his opponent, a towering six-limbed warrior, clad in dark armor, his eyes burning with malice. His name was Karath, one of Tsathis' elite enforcers. The alien's forearms flexed, revealing razor-sharp combat blades extending from his gauntlets. Ethan exhaled sharply. "So, what are the rules?" Zara, standing at the edge of the arena, spoke grimly. "The only rule is survival." A deep drum sounded. Karath charge. Ethan barely had time to react before the warrior was upon him, moving impossibly fast for something his size. Twin blades slashed through the air, aiming for his throat. And then Ethan moved. It wasn't conscious thought. It wasn't human instinct. It was something new. His body flowed like liquid, sidestepping the attack with impossible precision. His reflexes were too fast, his senses too sharp. He could see Karath's movements before they happened, as if his mind was predicting every strike a second ahead of time. He ducked, weaved, turned. His blood burned with energy. Karath snarled in frustration and swung wide. Ethan caught the blade with his bare hand. Gasps erupted from the audience. The weapon should have sliced through him, should have severed his fingers completely. But his skin held firm. The blade only scratched the surface. Karath hesitated. Ethan didn't. He punched forward, his fist striking the warrior's chest, with unnatural strength. The impact was devastating. Karath's massive frame lifted off the ground, flying backward 20 feet before crashing into the stone wall. The arena went silent. Ethan stood there, chest heaving, his hands trembling from the sheer force he had just unleashed. What the hell was happening to him? Karath groaned, but didn't rise. Vorak's voice boomed through the chamber. The human has proven himself. The crowd erupted into deafening roars of approval. But as Ethan turned toward Zara, he saw something in her eyes. Not pride, fear, and then the truth finally hit him. This wasn't just about the marriage. This wasn't just about tradition. The High Council had engineered this bond for a reason. They didn't want Ethan dead. They wanted to see what he would become. The truth about the bond. The cheers of the arena still echoed in Ethan's ears long after the match was over. He could still feel the raw power coursing through his veins, the unnatural strength that had allowed him to crush a Xalvoran warrior in a single blow. It wasn't normal. It wasn't human. And Zara knew it. She hadn't said a word since the fight ended. She led him through the maze-like corridors of the Xalvoran citadel in silence, her movements tense, her mind a storm of unreadable emotions. Ethan could feel them through the bond now. A connection that was getting stronger every second. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they arrived at a secluded chamber deep within the citadel. The walls were covered in glowing Xalvoran script, and the air buzzed with hidden energy. Ethan turned to Zara, his patience running thin. "All right, enough games. What the hell is happening to me?" Zara didn't answer immediately. She moved toward a control panel on the wall and activated it. A holographic display flickered to life, showing genetic sequences, medical scans, his scans. "Ethan Carter, human diplomat," she murmured. "Age 32. Healthy. Baseline human genetics. Until the bonding." Ethan stepped forward, staring at the data. His DNA was shifting, mutating. His bones were denser. His muscle fibers had tripled in strength. His reaction time had surpassed Xalvoran standards. And it was still accelerating. "This isn't just some cultural ritual, is it?" Ethan said, voice cold. Zara finally met his eyes. There was guilt there. No, it never was. The room fell silent. Ethan's stomach twisted. He had suspected it. Deep down, he had felt it. But hearing her say it out loud made it real. "Then what the hell is it?" Zara hesitated. Then, with a quiet sigh, she activated another file. A video recording. It flickered to life, revealing a darkened council chamber. In the center stood High Chancellor Vorak. But he wasn't alone. Surrounding him were human officials. Ethan's blood ran cold. These weren't random humans. They were military leaders, scientists, government officials from Earth. "This is from 6 months ago," Zara said, "before you even arrived on Xalvora." Ethan watched in stunned silence as the figures in the hologram spoke. "The war is coming," one of the humans said. "The galactic dominion is already moving toward our systems. We don't have the technology to stand against them." "But you do," another human added, looking directly at Vorak. "Xalvoran warriors are some of the strongest in the galaxy. Your genetics are superior to ours. If we are to survive, we must evolve." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "You made a deal." Zara nodded. "A High Council and your government agreed to an experiment. A test to see if a human could be enhanced through the bond. If we could create a warrior powerful enough to fight in the coming war." Ethan took a step back, shaking his head. "No. No. I wasn't chosen for this mission because of diplomacy. I was sent here to be a lab rat." Zara's jaw tightened. "They chose you because you were the perfect candidate. Young enough, physically fit, mentally adaptable, and," she hesitated, "disposable enough that if the experiment failed, there would be no consequences." A cold rage settled in Ethan's chest. "So I was never supposed to leave this planet alive." Zara exhaled. If you had rejected the bond, you would have been executed. If the bond failed, you would have been disposed of quietly. But now, things have changed. She turned back to the hologram. It showed Ethan's latest scans. The changes in his body were still accelerating. His neural activity had doubled. His reaction speed was now beyond measurable human limits. "You're not just surviving the transformation," Zara said quietly. "You're surpassing expectations. The bond wasn't just a success, it was a breakthrough." Ethan swallowed, his fists tightening. "So what happens now?" Zara hesitated. "Vorak sees you as a weapon. He will use you in the war against the Dominion. Your own people, if they knew what you've become, they would try to control you." Ethan's mind raced. His entire life, everything he thought he knew, had been manipulated from the start. "And you?" he asked, voice quiet. Zara looked away. "I was meant to guide the experiment, ensure your compliance. But now, I don't know anymore." Ethan took a slow step forward. "Do you think I'm a weapon?" Zara hesitated for only a second. "No," she said. "I think you're something even more dangerous." A long silence followed. Then, before Ethan could respond, the alarm blared again. Zara's head snapped up. "They're coming." Ethan didn't need to ask who. He could feel it through the bond. A massive fleet was descending on Salvora, Dominion warships. The war had begun, and he was at the center of it. War, betrayal, and a final choice. The sky burned with fire. Massive Dominion warships descended upon Salvora, their dark, jagged hulls blotting out the twin moons above. Bright red plasma beams rained down from orbit, striking the city's towering blackstone spires. The force of the explosions shook the ground, sending tremors through the citadel. From the balcony of the Grand Hall, Ethan Carter watched as the war began. His heartbeat was steady, too steady. He should have been afraid. He should have felt mortal terror at the sight of an entire invasion force descending upon them. But he didn't. Instead, something inside him stirred, something new, something powerful. The bond was at its peak. His mind felt the war before it happened, like an instinct he hadn't known he possessed. His enhanced senses picked up every tactical movement, every shift in the battle, as if he were connected to the very pulse of war itself. The Dominion ground troops were deploying heavy mechs at the city's edge. Squads of elite soldiers in exo-armor were moving in tight formations, pushing toward the palace. This wasn't just an invasion. This was an execution. And the target wasn't just Zalvora. It was him. "The Dominion knows about me." Ethan turned to Zara, who stood beside him, her face grim. The glow of the burning city reflected in her golden eyes. "They know," he murmured. Zara nodded. "They must have intercepted the data. Your transformation isn't a secret anymore. And if they understand what you are, then they can't allow me to live." Ethan finished. Zara clenched her fists. "Vorak will expect you to fight. He will demand it." Ethan smirked. "That's funny. He still thinks I take orders." Zara shot him a sharp look. "This isn't the time for defiance. If you don't fight, you will die. And if you do fight..." She trailed off. Ethan frowned. "If I do fight, what?" Zara hesitated, then spoke softly. "Then you might not stop." A chill ran through Ethan's spine. "What am I becoming?" The betrayal. Before Ethan could respond, the doors to the chamber burst open. High Chancellor Vorak entered, flanked by armed guards. His face was unreadable, his golden eyes piercing. "The war is here, human," he said coldly. "It is time you fulfilled your purpose." Ethan took a slow breath. "My purpose?" Vorak stepped forward. "You were created to be a weapon, a warrior unlike any before you. Now, prove yourself." Zara stiffened. "Chancellor, you can't force him." Vorak cut her off. "I do not care about your sentiment, Commander. The bond has worked. The human is our greatest asset. If we win this war, it will be because of him. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. And if I refuse? He asked. Vorak tilted his head. Then you are of no use to us, and we do not keep things that are useless. Ethan clenched his fists. So that was it. He had never been anything more than a test subject, a weapon to be used and discarded when convenient. Zara stepped in front of Ethan, her voice low and dangerous. You will not threaten him. Vorak stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. You grow weak, Zara. This is what happens when a warrior allows emotions to cloud their judgment. Zara's jaw tightened, but she didn't step aside. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. It's all right, he said softly. Then he looked at Vorak. You want me to fight? Fine, I'll fight. Vorak's lips curled in satisfaction. Good. Ethan leaned in slightly. But not for you. Before anyone could react, Ethan moved. Faster than any of them could anticipate. His enhanced reflexes kicked in as he grabbed one of the guard's plasma rifles, spinning it upward before anyone could stop him. One shot. The energy blast struck the ceiling, causing a massive explosion. Debris rained down, and in the chaos, Ethan grabbed Zara's wrist and ran. Move. Escape and the choice that will define him. The halls of the palace were filled with warriors rushing toward the battlefield. Ethan and Zara weaved through the chaos, dodging patrols as they made their way to the hidden launch bay deep within the citadel. We're stealing a ship, Zara asked. We're getting the hell off this planet, Ethan corrected. Zara hesitated. And then what? Ethan didn't answer, because he didn't know. The truth was, he didn't have a side anymore. He had been betrayed by the High Council, used by his own people. And now, the Dominion wanted him dead before he could become something they couldn't control. There was no safe place left. They reached the launch bay. A sleek Zalvoran attack fighter sat idle, its engines ready. Zara turned to Ethan. You could still fight, she said. Ethan exhaled. You think that's the answer? Zara didn't answer immediately. I don't know, she admitted. But I know this, if you run, you will always be hunted. You will always be looking over your shoulder. If you stay and fight, at least you have a chance to end this on your own terms. Ethan stared at her. Then he looked at his hands. They didn't look like his hands anymore. They were stronger. The veins beneath his skin glowed faintly, as if filled with some kind of energy beyond human comprehension. Maybe Zara was right. Maybe the only way forward was through fire. Ethan took a slow breath. Then let's burn it all down. Zara gave him a small, knowing smile. They boarded the ship, and as they blasted off into the sky, the world behind them erupted into war. A new future, epic conclusion. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a sea of darkness interrupted only by the distant glow of burning planets. The stolen Zalvoran attack fighter tore through space at breakneck speed, its engines humming with raw energy. Ethan Carter sat in the pilot's seat, gripping the controls with unnatural precision. He could feel everything. The vibrations of the ship, the subtle shifts in gravity, the pulse of the stars themselves. This wasn't normal. This wasn't human. Zara sat beside him, silent, watching him closely. She hadn't said much since they escaped Zalvora, but Ethan could sense her emotions now through the bond. Her unease, her fear, her doubt. She was afraid. Not of him, but of what he was becoming. The war still rages. The Dominion's war fleet was tearing through the Zalvoran defenses. Even from orbit, they could see the battle unfolding below. A sea of energy blasts, collapsing towers, and entire warships shattered in the skies. Ethan clenched his jaw. They won't stop, he muttered. Zara nodded. The Dominion never stops. He turned to her. Then what's our next move? She hesitated. We need to get as far away from this war as possible. If they capture you, they will use you. If Zalvora wins, Vorak will never let you go. There is no future for you in this war, Ethan. Ethan exhaled sharply. Then we make one. Zara frowned. What do you mean? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled up a holographic map of known space. His enhanced mind processed the data at blinding speed, absorbing every possible outcome, every strategic possibility. The Dominion is winning, he said. The Exalvoran forces are fighting bravely, but they're outnumbered, outgunned. If this continues, your people won't last more than a few days. Zara's eyes darkened. She knew he was right. Then why aren't we running? She asked. Ethan turned to her. Because I can end this war. Becoming the weapon they feared. Zara stiffened. You can't be serious. Ethan felt her fear through the bond, the sheer dread at what he was suggesting. But deep down, he knew it was the only way. I don't have a choice, Zara. He flexed his hands. They glowed faintly now, the bond reaching its final stages. His strength, speed, reflexes, they had already surpassed anything humanly possible. And that wasn't all. He could feel something else now. A deeper connection. A force beyond his understanding. The Dominion knew it too. That's why they had come. They weren't invading just for Exalvora. They were invading for him. They're afraid of me, Ethan said. They don't fear Exalvora. They fear what I can do. Zara shook her head. Ethan, the bond. It's changing you. You're thinking like a warrior, not a diplomat. He smirked. Maybe that's what I am now. She grabbed his wrist. No, you are more than a weapon. You still have a choice. Ethan hesitated. Did he? The war was already here. People were dying. Running wasn't an option anymore. He had to fight. The only question was how far he was willing to go. The final battle. The Exalvoran fleet was on the brink of collapse. Dominion warships tore through their formations with brutal efficiency, unleashing planet-shattering firepower. And in the middle of it all, a single human ship emerged from the darkness. Ethan piloted the attack fighter toward the Dominion's flagship, his heart pounding like a war drum. This is suicide, Zara muttered. Not if we do it right. The Dominion's warships locked onto them instantly, launching a storm of missiles in their direction. But Ethan was already moving. His reflexes kicked in, faster than light, faster than thought. The fighter weaved through the onslaught with inhuman precision, dodging each projectile with an ease that should have been impossible. Zara's eyes widened. Ethan, how are you doing this? He didn't know. He wasn't flying the ship anymore. He was the ship. Every system, every circuit, it felt like an extension of his own body. He could feel the flow of energy through the engines, the trajectory of every projectile around him. The bond was complete, and he was unstoppable. They pierced through the enemy line, heading straight for the Dominion's command ship. And then he heard it. A voice. Not Zara's. Not his own. Something else. A voice that echoed inside his mind. You are not human anymore, Ethan Carter. His breath caught in his throat. What? Zara turned to him, confused. What is it? But he couldn't answer, because the voice was speaking only to him. You are the first of a new kind, a being neither human nor Exalvoran, a bridge between species, a force beyond war. Ethan's hands trembled on the controls. Who are you? He whispered. We are the ones who came before, and we have been waiting for you. The Dominion flagship was right in front of them now, and Ethan knew what he had to do. The end, or the beginning. Zara grabbed his arm. Ethan, whatever you're hearing, ignore it. We have to destroy that ship. But Ethan's mind was already racing. He understood now. The bond wasn't just a biological link. It wasn't just about strength or speed. It was something far greater. A connection to something ancient, something powerful, something that transcended war itself. He had a choice. Destroy the Dominion flagship and end the war, or unlock the full power of the bond and become something more. He turned to Zara. You trust me, right? She hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. Then hold on. Ethan closed his eyes. He reached into the bond, deeper than ever before, and for the first time, he let go. The ship exploded with light, energy surging outward like a supernova. The Dominion fleet froze mid-attack, their systems shutting down simultaneously. And then, a new force emerged. Something ancient. Something waiting for him all along. And as the universe shifted, as reality itself bent around him, Ethan Carter understood one thing. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning.